All right, thank you. Well, welcome everybody. So happy to be back here at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte Cybersecurity Summit. I've been participating in this annual event on and off for going on 6-7 years, and it's been a fantastic event. They do such a great job of organizing so many great speakers, sponsors, bringing in some fantastic exhibits, great content, relevant content, and obviously driving that content down to the educational level and trying to really empower and educate folks coming out of UNCC's program, which is again is second to none in my opinion here in the Southeast, and couldn't be more happy to talk about a really important topic that I think is oftentimes undervalued, and that's finding talent, and the talent discussion often comes up in terms of education and often comes up in a variety of different methods in terms of recruitment to retention to development and to managing talent once you do identify the talent for your organization. So I'm going to talk about a lot of different things and try to condense this into a 45-minute setting. So it could be, there's a lot of meat to it. So if you certainly have questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. Again, my name is Matt Donato. I'm a managing director here at CyberSN. CyberSN is one of the largest, if not the largest, privately held women-owned cybersecurity search and staffing solutions firms in the U.S. Based here in Charlotte, so in your backyard. And those of you joining us from afar, welcome. Should be a great turnout. So as I mentioned, kind of a five-prong approach that I'm going to cover. So talking about the talent crisis, especially post-pandemic, we all have known that cybersecurity recruitment and getting access and finding qualified professionals, whether it be entry level, experienced professionals, et cetera, has always been a challenge, but it's much more challenging now than ever before. So we'll talk about the crisis, talk about some data that I think is important to understand. And we'll talk about, as an organization, what you need to do to acquire the talent, what you need to do to be most competitive in terms of hiring talent for your organization, some tactics, some methods, some things to know, some things to avoid, et cetera. And we'll talk about some tips that I like to suggest you embed into your process from my interviewing and hiring perspective. And then once you identified and hired that professional, what do you do to onboard them into your organization? How do you embed them into the social climate that you have? And then lastly, talking about talent development and the strategy associated with talent development. So we'll do that. And there are people joining, so feel free to jump in as you have questions. I welcome anybody to do that. So to jump right into the meat of things, let's talk about the crisis, the elephant in the room, what that does entail. So as I mentioned before, we all know there's a cybersecurity talent crisis. We all know that there's a shortage. We all understand that finding qualified professionals is a challenge. Everybody's hiring. The demand is incredibly high, higher than we've ever seen before in security. So what does that actually mean? Well, let's talk about that specifically. So there are almost 500,000 unfilled cybersecurity positions across the nation, according to data gathered from Commerce Department grant. So a lot of time and research has gone into accumulating this type of information. We often talk about this number being somewhat south of this number, but it's actually increasing year after year. And so just looking at the current state, there's almost 500,000 unfilled positions. Okay, so that's the obvious thing that we know about. And so for those of you that are familiar with ISC squared, globally they think we are short just over 3 million cybersecurity workers. And in the US, almost at 1 million, which is baffling to me, right? So it's a systemic challenge, it is an educational challenge, but it's also an organizational challenge from a development perspective. And how do we cross-train professionals into this domain? So just sharing some relevant data that you need to know. Analytics Insights forecast that over 10 plus million new job openings in cybersecurity will be forecasted by 2023, compared to 3+ million job openings in 2019. That is a massive jump, people. That delta is huge, and it's something that I'm not accustomed to seeing in positions, and I've been recruiting for almost 20 years in a variety of areas, in cybersecurity specifically the last 6. It's grown exponentially over time. The field is becoming more complicated, more sophisticated. Domains are becoming more specific, and if you know the NICE cybersecurity workforce framework, who does a great job capturing these job categories and job functions, you know that the field itself is maturing day after day. So you look at the widest gap in the workforce that we've ever seen. And so the problem, it will worse in the upcoming years. And so my job here is not to instill fear, it's to identify and drive awareness. And so we can talk about what to do once we acknowledge that there is a crisis and what that means going forward. And one last thing I think that's important to acknowledge is fewer than 25% of applicants are qualified for open positions. You have a lot of people trying to get into the field, but unfortunately are not qualified for the positions. So that's sometimes that could be objective, sometimes that could be a subjective point of view, but fewer than 25%. If that number should be closer to 50, we look at a 1-to-2 ratio from applicants to being qualified for certain positions. To under 25% is a staggering data point, as if the ones above that are not. So I look at a couple of markets. I picked DC because DC is a nice market to look at. Obviously, it's our nation's capital, but it encompasses both the government sector, as well as the commercial sector. So you've got close to 19,000 cyber jobs that are open and 25,000 cyber professionals. Now, this does not mean that they align. This heat map specifically shows the ratio of existing cybersecurity workers to cybersecurity job openings. Again, not a favorable data point if you look at the ratio from a supply and demand perspective. So when you look at the economics of it, it's really troubling to see that this is such a disproportionate number. You'd like to see a much lower percentage of jobs or number of jobs to a much higher number of professionals, thereby making that ratio much more favorable. And again, this is just for DC people. This is just one of so many large, what I call tier 1 cities across the US. Other tier 1 cities being Boston, New York, etc. DC is obviously a major region that we can certainly highlight. All right, so now that we've identified the challenges, we all understand the data where the crisis is. Let's talk about what organizations need to do to attract and recruit qualified professionals for these positions. Well, first of all, a lot of them take a shotgun approach, or they have an impulse decision-making process. They embed this hiring process into their normal HR quote-unquote hiring process. Unfortunately, that is a problematic approach. That is not really a plan. They don't really understand the data nor the challenges that we have. And so therein lies the opportunity. Okay, once we understand the supply and the demand, we understand and acknowledge that there's a deficit, we know what we're up against, at least we have an idea about how we need to be most competitive. And so as an organization, as you build a strategy to go to market to start to recruit qualified professionals for your positions, the first thing you do, just like anything else, is let's make a plan. Let's talk about what this looks like. All right, first of all, if you're an organization, you need to figure out who you are, what your culture is, what the company's mission looks like. Identify what the values are of your organization. Yes, it's one thing to attract qualified professionals to an organization that has a lot of things to be done, a lot of vulnerabilities, a lot of potential inherent risks. However, people want to be part of a culture. They want to be part of a team. So really try to assess what our core values are, not only as an organization, but what's the mission and the values of our specific team as a security program. Let's really harness that message and almost create a marketing plan to go to market to really window dress that thing, right? So really understand and prop up what we're going to market, what we're quote unquote selling to the market when we go to identify and recruit qualified professionals, and then define what the culture of that team is going to look like. Meaning, is this a collaborative group? Are we fast paced? Are we move quickly? Are we nimble? Are we agile? What are the values that define the culture of this team? And what are some of the behaviors that we have? We don't have a hierarchical structure. We don't have a top-down approach to making decisions. We're all equals. We're all focused on our mission. We're all there to execute our mission that we have, and we're working towards that goal. Or are we a matrix organization that has tons of layers with more of a political climate? But really understanding what that climate is, whether you're small or a large program, before you go to market is an integral part of your success and will dictate the outcome that you intend to have. And so understanding that unique value proposition is critical. And then lastly, why do security professionals want to work for you? So really understand your story and understand what you can offer. And as we're talking about talent retention, development of that talent is critical. People want to get access to certifications. They want to get education. They want to get access to new tools, new systems, new processes. They want to be part of an environment that's got significant challenges because we are mostly mission focused. So really understanding why people want to come work not only for your organization, but more importantly, your team, and what kind of value that's going to offer the business is key. So maximizing your brand exposure. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that, just judging by the people that are involved in this conversation today. There's not a whole lot of stakeholders that need to understand the value proposition and how to maximize their brand, but it is something to reference quickly. Really understanding productivity in your team, how to assess that is key. Understanding the satisfaction of your team is key. What you need to do to engage and retain that talent that you have is key as well. These are all part of the hiring and the productivity, and more importantly, the results that you get as an organization. Really understanding the specifics of your team and your organization is key. And if you've had a team for a while and you're looking to grow and mature, really having some good data to be able to understand what the brand is and how to maximize that brand when you go to market is key. All right, this is the exciting part, or maybe not so much, depending on those of you involved in this process. If you've been involved in interviewing or hiring talent for your team, you understand that the processes need to evolve and need to change. One of the biggest things that we see, guys, is right now speed kills. But before speed is alignment. And so one thing that we see as a recruiting firm that's just focused in cybersecurity is that the organization, the stakeholders within that organization are not always aligned on what they need. There's not an in-depth needs analysis, if you will, understanding where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, their opportunities, and what kind of inherent threats. They may understand the threats from a vulnerabilities perspective, but they don't understand the risk landscape for their organization. And so really educating the business on exactly what that looks like and what that means and how that translates to going to market to recruit qualified professionals for your team. Thus, what does that mean for the interviewing process? Including people from the business outside of your respective program depends on the level and the visibility of the position. Obviously, if it's a senior level role, managerial and above, or it's an architect level position or a role that's going to have a high degree of impact, you probably want to expose that interviewer, that person interviewing for that position, to some groups that perhaps run adjacent to your team or have a great deal of exposure. Operational risk, for example, finance, could be HR. It depends on your organization, the industry that you're in, but really exposing certain individuals and really getting them aligned to what the mission is and what you're trying to accomplish functionally is really important. And then you talk about the hiring process. So one thing I want to talk about the hiring process is I wanted to go back to speed. Speed to market, speed to interview, and speed to hire. There's an old saying, I'm sure you all have heard it in some shape or fashion, time kills all deals. Well, that definitely applies to the interviewing and the hiring process right now, specifically in the cybersecurity landscape. The hiring economy is fiercely competitive, as we know. We've talked about that before. The interview and the hiring process needs to be astringent, it needs to be streamlined, and it needs to be very quick. Last thing that you want to experience as a professional is a very laborious, drawn out interview process that almost makes you jump through a ton of hoops. It's one thing if you have a multi-prong or a multi-step interview process. It's another to drag it out over a 9, 12, 18-week process. Qualified professionals, whether they're junior or senior level professionals, when they come up to Periscope depth, they start looking for opportunities. If they're indeed qualified for your role, they're going to likely have 3 to 5 other job opportunities at the same time. So what are you doing to be the most competitive you can to ensure that you're hiring the best athletes that you can for your team? Streamline your process as much as possible is the key takeaway for that. The onboarding process. Well, yeah. When we have conversations with our clients and we talk about their onboarding process, I oftentimes get deer in the headlights, or I get responses from hiring managers that defer to HR, or they defer to other aspects of the team, or they have we kind of make it up as we go along, or we just expose them to the team. The bottom line is the onboarding process is typically a 30, 60, 90, 6-month approach to some professionals, but it's not really aligned to the rest of the organization. They may embed them into the team itself, but they limit their exposure to the organization. It needs to be all of the above, but first and foremost, figure out what's most important. The onboarding process, fundamentally speaking, should be not terribly different than other groups within that company, whether it's finance, whether it's technology. Yes, there's certain intricacies about your program that need to be aware of. There's certain intricacies about getting exposure to the technologies, the processes, the state of maturity, how things are being done the communication within the team, understanding where you are and where you're going. All that's important. Sprinkle that out over a period of time, right? But also expose these folks to the rest of the business. You want to get them exposure to the rest of the organization, because again, at the end of the day, the initiative should be to operate as one team, not just as a silo within a larger team. And I think we hear and we see a lot of those failed onboarding processes. For starters, day 1 through day 5, day 20 should not be terribly different. You want to make a resounding impact and make them feel wanted and welcome from the first day they join the organization. You want that experience to be memorable. It's almost like they're joining a family, right? And so when you welcome somebody in your family, you celebrate, you acknowledge that this is a big marquee event, and you almost need to get that person, you need to get the team behind that welcoming, that feeling that this is really something that I truly made the right decision in joining, and I could not be more excited to be a part of this organization, and here's why. And then define what that why looks like, how you're going to embed them into the fold, and then what that roadmap looks like over the first 30, 60, 90 days. But don't forget that the onboarding process doesn't stop at 90 days, right? There's a lot of very immature programs out there. There's a lot of initiatives that need to be executed. And so it's not just cut them loose in the deep end, let's see how they swim. There's an element of that, and sometimes we're not afforded with the luxury of being able to take our time to onboard them slowly into the organization. Sometimes you have no choice but to cut them loose. But you have to have a checks and a balance. You have to have two-way communication. You have to have a good feedback loop. And hopefully you've got some comm structure in place to where there's two-way communication, both upstream to the leadership and downstream to the individual contributors. And then there's a collaborative setting, whether it be throughout the teams. There's a lot of great collaboration platforms that are out there that a lot of organizations use that allow people to provide real-time communication and collaboration. If you don't have something like that, I encourage you to look at it. But be mindful of where your hierarchy or what's most important from the early stages of onboarding these professionals into your organization. Yes, cutting them loose can be helpful, but give them enough rope to where they don't hang themselves. Be very mindful of how you would feel when you're cut loose and onboarded into a new organization. Really try to empathize and identify that this is a learning process and people are going to be a little bit more reserved by and large in the beginning. And so how are you making them feel welcome and included into the team? Key part that we just don't see organizations really being mindful of, because everyone's, for the most part, is operating with a high degree of urgency and almost operating as if they're trying to play catch up. And so again, a lot of organizations just don't have the luxury of having a methodical onboarding process, but it does behoove you to think about that plan and think about how you're going to sprinkle them into the organization. So guys, just real hit pause. I cannot see questions. Some of you are on mute, so forgive me. I'm going to go off screen and just check to see if there's any dialogue that I'm missing. We are recording this. So again, if folks have questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'll provide my contact information afterwards so y'all have it. But I'm happy to take emails, calls, whatever works best for you guys. Happy to help in any way that I can. So I'm going to recap a couple of things around the onboarding process. 25% of employees feel connected to their companies, and 50% don't find meaning or purpose in their current role. How does that make you guys feel? What does that data share? What does that data tell you about those organizations? They don't feel connected. That's a challenge. That's a huge problem, right? Again, back to communication in the element and the importance of communication within the organization. Connecting them to the business, feeling purpose, adding value, feeling like you have meaning and that you're included into the culture is such an important part. So as you create a plan for onboarding these professionals, be very, very mindful of how you're integrating them into the entire social fabric of the business. Get them exposure to non-like areas. Get them exposure to non-like-minded individuals, and to just create that safe environment where people feel like they can communicate openly and they can find meaning in what they're doing. And then set goals. I mean, obviously we know setting goals in any aspect of life or in any professional realm is important to do, but it shouldn't be any different. Up to 60% of companies indicate that they do not see any milestones or concrete goals for new hires to attain. To simplify the playbook, 30, 60, 90, 6 months. Set up milestones and or markers throughout that onboarding process. Clearly define obtainable goals, and that what indicators or key performance indicators you're going to have to show that you're meeting those. And then if you're not, provide timely feedback. Sit down with the individual to say, hey, perhaps I wasn't clear, or perhaps we had a disconnect, or I'd like to see more of this, or like to see more of that. And then, oh, by the way, ask them about their feedback. A lot of organizations, or a lot of people in organizations do share that it's not a two-way street. They feel like they were given feedback or direction sometimes, but they're not allowed to provide feedback upstream or to their superiors and or their team or to the business. It absolutely should be a circular process. It should not just be a linear top-down approach. You want to create a safe environment where you can provide feedback around your onboarding. I'd like to get, and state your request, guys. State your request specifically. Don't be broad that you just want exposure to the business. State specifically a request and state why, and then hope that you're going to be able to get access to those folks in your organization. I talked about this before. It's like being welcomed into a family. First impressions are lasting ones. 69% of employees are more likely to stay when their employers are at least 3 years after a great onboarding experience, right? I don't know, maybe I could give you a on the spot comparison. It's like starting your first semester with a great GPA. you know, Subsequent semesters you could probably get by with a couple C's and maybe drive down that GPA. But if you start off with a bang, you got a little bit more rope to have a couple of lips or a couple of failures along the way, and you can right the ship pretty quick. You start behind the 8 ball, it's going to be much, much higher of a summit for you to climb. So just be very, very mindful of how you do that. Professionals here that check in. This is not just for managers to check in with their teams. This is for you guys to check in with your peers. And be mindful of privacy and trust of information. I mean, there's always going to be a little bit of bantering within an office, or there's always going to be a little bit of water cooler talk, if you will. Even though most of us are virtual now, there's a degree of that's happening. It behooves you to share some of this information with your bosses and your bosses' bosses, right? You need to feel safe, and you need to empower a safe culture of which people feel like that feedback can be shared without someone fearing that they're going to get in trouble, they're going to be scrutinized, or that they're going to be alienated. No one wants to feel micromanaged or wants to feel like they're being managed with fear. So it behooves the managers and the leaders in this group to really understand how to create a safe environment and really send that message from day one that I want your feedback. Yes, on tools, technology, processes, lack of maturity, what we should be doing, ideas, et cetera, but also on how you're being integrated into the culture of organization. Because without the latter part, the first segments can't happen at all. The processes, the milestones being hit, the culture is not solid, then everything else will fall apart after that. So talent development. So I don't have a magic blue pill for this. Bad news. Good news is there are easy, low-hanging fruit tactics that you can implement from today. And we're going to talk about some of those talent development strategies. We all know that there's training, gamification, simulated events that we can do to really give people downrange experience to what's actually happening, whether it's tabletop exercises to understand the incident response plan, to formulate for the business, to then rolling that exercise out to the business. That kind of experience, tasking someone to own that project, who maybe needs to step up and own something for the first time, is a great opportunity to develop talent. Don't just lean on your managers or your senior managers or your directors to lead some of these tasks. Of course, they have to have the competence to do it, but including people in on some of these initiatives, even though they're a little bit more of a bigger stretch for people to be included in, those of you that are looking to elevate up need to ask and state your request. Those of you that are in a superior or managerial capacity need to reach down and be receptive to people who want to get involved in some of these things. Gamification and or simulated exercises, incident response planning, crisis management, business continuity, outages, et cetera, understanding what happens if and when, including people involved in those simulated exercises, is a critical part of success. Not to mention it readies the business for if and when you do have an event or an incident. And what does that mean for the business, and how are you going to task people to own and understand conceptually what that means and what kind of impact that's going to have? Certifications, pretty clear cut and dry, guys. I mean, every single week we see new certifications being added by new associations across the country or on a global scale. I certainly encourage you, if you're not interested or if you haven't gotten certifications, that you do. One thing I see a lot of, just a little bit of wisdom to pass along. Be very mindful about your certification that you want to get. Make sure it's value add and it's applicable to what you do. More importantly, where you want to go. We've seen a lot of people just go out and become over certified and get too many credentials and over educate themselves, but they're not really adding any value to the business. They're not really applying what they're learning to the business. Understand what you want to do both short and long term. Figure out what kind of value that's going to offer, obviously personally, professionally, but also the business, the team that you're a part of. I'd be lying to say, guys, if people didn't go out and get education and certifications, didn't take that skills, they'll take those skills and go elsewhere. We all be naive to think that doesn't happen. It's unfortunate when it does, and it happens every single day at a multiple of 100. But you can't worry about things you can't control if you're a manager in this group. What you can control is the culture, the purpose that you have, the safety that you offer, the opportunity that you're offering the organization, what you guys are doing for the business. Then we also have to just accept the fact that we're not going to be able to keep everybody. Look how fiercely competitive this climate is. You know, we're dealing with a deficit of over 800,000 professionals in the U.S. alone over the next couple of years. And so, just economically speaking, just using sheer logic, you're not going to be able to keep everybody. You're going to lose somebody because of money. You're going to lose somebody because of developments in their career. But what you can control is the now, right? And building a program and a team that is solid, that has a solid culture, that adds value to the business, that safeguards the assets, and you're training and developing your people. For me, I want someone to always succeed me. That would be my point of view. Empower and equip your team to be able to replace you or to take more off of your plate so then you can elevate. And then if they elevate out of the organization, again, that's something that you really can't control. There's a strategy to focus on retention. And we're talking about that partially in terms of developing the talent, but it's a byproduct of where we are in this current hiring economy. Personal growth. Don't just always focus on the domain expertise that you're trying to develop. Talent development also comes down to the personal development of these people, of these professionals. What are they doing to become better versions of themselves? Communication skills, presentation. There's 1,000 different ways you can skin this cat and talk about personal development. Sometimes it's working towards a goal. They want to buy their first house. They have aspirations to start a family. Are you providing an environment that allots for work-life balance? There's a number of different things that you can embed, but what is your personal growth plan? Not only your professional growth plan for your team. And then inversely, think about your personal development path as a professional and your professional development path, and how do those two intertwine? It's really hard for us, and we all learned this the hard way during the pandemic when things got really tough at the beginning. We all were decentralized overnight. And all of a sudden, because we're all virtual, the business is trying to figure out how to operate and sustain a virtual model. And so security professionals, much like IT professionals, were working around the clock to keep things not only safe, but keep things running. And it's difficult. I'd be lying if I don't have firsthand experience with that, so I can only empathize with what that frustration is like. But being in the recruiting field, talking to these professionals day in and day out, hearing some of the stories, providing guidance for them when they're in tough scenarios, when they're working 100-hour work weeks, 18, 20 weeks in a row, they finally get exhausted and they become burnt out. Their mental health becomes compromised. Their relationships become compromised. Managers, it behooves you to lean into that and really understand the balance that you're going to be able to create and what that means to the business, and then setting expectations with the business. Another thing that I like to see, and I don't see enough of, is community involvement. Now, it's a double-edged sword because you want people to be involved in getting education, getting certs, getting training, being involved with associations like ISC Squared, ISSA, OWASP, whatever it is. You want them to be involved, or if these is just podcasts or group meetups, whatever the involvement that you have, you want people to be involved in that. The trade-off is time. We don't have enough of that commodity, unfortunately. So starting small, getting them exposed maybe once a quarter or once a year to one community, and then empowering them to setting aside the allocated time that I want you, John or Jane, I want you to be involved in this one group. Pick one. I see a lot of folks try to get involved in a lot of different things. They don't last very long. They kind of come and they go, right? Pick one that aligns to you personally and or professionally. You have a passion for what it aligns to, and get involved in that. That could be your alumni. That could be a variety of different things. There's a long laundry list, and I'll spare you the details of that. But community involvement is critical. It's also a method of giving back. And I love to see that, because we need to pay it forward. That community involvement is critical. It's an integral part of success for us to be able to close this gap right now. We're dealing with too much of a shortage for talent, and organizations are struggling for that. So paying it forward is just the right thing to do, and getting involved in organizations and sharing ideas. Not to mention, it's a great way to learn and network. I've seen a lot of people over the last couple of years, especially when people are becoming dissatisfied, want to start to look for new opportunities. And I start to talk to them about their network and their community, their surrounding cast outside of their current employer. A lot of them don't have it, right? And so people care about it once they need it, but then they lose sight of it when they don't. It needs to be something that you keep in mind and you nurture over a period of time. My advice to you is to start small and keep it simple. Surround yourself with a group of people that may or may not be like-minded individuals. Get involved in a community or two that you really align to, and stay committed to that. Add the value that you can when you can, and really try to make that part of your talent development strategy. Team bonding, pretty straightforward. Whether it's happy hours, whether it's group learning sessions, whether it's getting exposure to a breakout session, doing something fun outdoors, whatever it might be. These are, again, low-hanging fruit opportunities for you to get your team outside of the confines of the work environment and do something that's not work-related, right? Allow people to be able to connect interpersonally and really share and celebrate that time together. I get it. We all work a lot. We all work a lot together. You may not want to spend personal time bonding with your team outside of the normal work hours. I get that. So again, start small. Find one thing to do a month or one thing to do a quarter. I see organizations do the opposite ends of the spectrum. They do too much of it, where it's just kind of soaking up time and trying to create friends of working colleagues. Depends on your viewpoint of that. Not necessarily for me or for everybody, but for some. And then other organizations just punch in and punch out, and there's no real bonding opportunity. There's no engagement. There's no interpersonal connections being developed. And so how do you find a healthy balance? The best place to start is to ask your team. Take ideas from your team. Managers in this group, take ideas from your team. What do they want to do? Don't just say, hey, I want to go out and do a ropes course at the Whitewater Rafting Center next Saturday. It's like, all right, first of all, that's choosing the family time. Does that work? I've got 5 dads and 6 moms here. Does that work for them? Probably not, unless it's family friendly. Even then, it could be challenging to fit that in. Maybe we cut out an hour and a half early for work one day and we shut it off and we go off site someplace. What do you guys want to do? Do you like breweries? Do you want to do a breakout room? Do you want to go for a walk, go play a pickup soccer? Whatever it is, get a pulse check from your team and see what they want to do. Ask them. Start with them. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, guys. Ask your teams. They're going to tell you pretty quick. So personal fulfillment is one of the most important things we see a lot of come up. You'd be surprised. Those of you in this session may disagree with me, but statistically showing year after year, salary is not the primary reason people are leaving. It's purpose, it's balance, and it's culture. And I think all those are intertwined. Not knowing what your meaning is in an organization is a really troubling feeling. And then being able to feel empowered and feeling like you've got the backing and the buy-in from your organization, like you feel like you're really making a connection and making an impact. Figure out what that journey looks like and how to achieve that, and really celebrate that and communicate that across the organization. And then the balance of work life is critical. Culture, we've been talking about it. That's in itself a large topic to tease apart. Probably could spend an hour in itself just talking about best practices and things to do and not to do. Over 70% of people want to work with their opinions are taken seriously. Nothing's worse, guys, when you have 10 great ideas, you share 3 of them that you think are game changers or opinions that you think are important or ideas that are going to be impactful, and they're just brushed off, or they're just put on a list of 100 and they're just brushed to the side and never revisited. Managers in this group, leaders in this session, you need to be able to figure out a method to be able to engage your team, to figure out what their opinions and their input is, and to be able to collect and consolidate that feedback and be able to apply that to the business. Not everything is going to be material and of value, but engage in that conversation collectively as a group, and then you as a leader make the decision of what's most important. But being taken seriously, ideas and opinions is important. 62% want to work where they can protect people and their data. Now we all know that we're in the safeguarding of assets business, if you will. We're safeguarding civilization if you want to be a little bit more serious about it. It's all intertwined. I mean, especially the highly regulated critical infrastructure organizations that are definitely tied to civilization and its safety. I mean, people want to feel like they're doing that. So mission really is important. It doesn't matter if you're a manufacturer of consumer products to a management consulting firm that is, get into an organization that's been compromised and you're recovering and restoring their breach, restoring their operations after they've been compromised. Whatever it is, really understanding your mission and be able to apply that. People want to feel like they're adding value and they feel like they're accomplishing the mission. 60% of cybersecurity workers want to work for a company where they clearly have defined ownership of their responsibilities. I'm sure if I took a poll or did a pulse check here or asked for hands, I guess virtual hands in this case, raising hands of how often your role changes and how you feel like you're kind of duplicating efforts or cross-pollinating with the rest of your team. You don't really have a clear defined roles and responsibilities. I think you would find a pretty large amount feel like there's some gray. Look, gray can be okay. Some of us have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, but a more of a linear approach to your job is helpful. It doesn't mean that there aren't ad hoc responsibilities or projects that you can take on. It's just being clear about defining what that is, when it is, and then checking in on how you align to that. For those of you who have not been to our website, cheesy sales plug here, sorry. Check out the cybersn.com website. We have a phenomenal platform that we've built that aligns to the NICE cybersecurity workforce framework, the job categories and the roles, the functional alignment to those roles. It's a great way for managers to really inspect what they expect. If they're expecting their security engineer to do 8 to 10 functional tasks, use that as a framework to be able to inspect, are they aligned to these functional tasks? Are they executing these tasks? How much of their time is spent doing these tasks? We've built a platform that really enables people to take a look at that, whether you're a professional and individual contributor or whether you're a person trying to hire talent or even manage talent. Great tool for that. 65% want an employer to view their cybersecurity more broadly than just from a technology perspective. I feel like technology is just one pillar of many in cybersecurity. I'm sure you all would agree. Yes, technology plays an integral part of that, but there's so much more beyond technology. It's really a risk management. It's really business risk, and understanding what business risk is and just wanting to feel more included in those conversations is important. So if you're operating in a silo and you just view as the tech team and the cyber extension of the tech team, try to figure out a way to break down those barriers and get more visibility and impact to the business. Again, I know easier said than done, what my 2 cents matters, but this is what the data tells you. 52% of people want to work for a company that trains employees on cybersecurity actively. Again, back to talent development strategies. Fundamental 101. Have your people seek out training, get certifications, and apply that knowledge into the business. Really getting crystal clear on what that's going to be and how it's going to add value to the business. I love it when CIOs or CISOs or leaders within security or even outside of security want their professionals who want to get certs or training. They want them to be able to put together a short business case as to why they're going to do it. It's not to have you jump through a hoop or that they're there to shoot you down, by and large. It's because they want to figure out what its material impact it's going to have in your organizations. We've talked about it. We see resumes, tons and tons day after day, that have people and professionals that have 10, 20, 30 certifications, and half of them are inactive, and none of them really add value or really add to their career trajectory. Just be very mindful of what that looks like. It'd be really concise, or make a concerted effort to understand that. Couple calls to action here. I'm going to skip through for the sake of time. We've got 4 minutes remaining. I certainly want to leave enough time for you guys to get to your next session. jump out and jump into your next. But pretty straightforward. Be committed. Prioritize the hire and be resilient with the hiring process. You want to stay committed, working with pace. Be rigorous about it, but be flexible. Unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, depends on your point of view, this is a candidate-driven market. What that means is candidates are in the driver's seat right now. It doesn't mean they have all the leverage, but if you have an open position, you saw the data earlier in this presentation that right now the demand for jobs significantly outweighs the supply. We're dealing with negative unemployment, so you have to be flexible throughout the process. These are working professionals oftentimes. They need to interview before hours, during lunch, after hours at times. Be ready to be flexible. If this is a priority, be committed, okay? If at first you don't succeed, try again. You can't fill a position with one professional, keep moving. Don't get discouraged. Listen to the market, listen to the feedback, ensuring that your people are having a positive experience. And be creative with that. I mean, this is probably music to some of your ears. Hire less experienced talent or intellectually curious. I'd rather hire an intellectually curious person with more aptitude and a great attitude than someone who knows everything and has the scars to prove it. Sometimes the latter is a better case for your business, but be open to the rising professionals. And that doesn't mean just in age, guys. That means people who have experience in other aspects of the business who are cross-training into cybersecurity. Also a great way to acquire new talent. Look internal to other departments. Like I said, be willing to offer training and develop people cross-functionally into your team. Look internal first. If you don't have the right resources that you could repurpose or train to, then obviously then you have to look external for your talent. It's only basically two options that you could do. Don't rely too much on certifications. Some aren't valuable, like we've talked about. Be grateful. I think celebrate the little wins. I think that comes down to culture and purpose, guys. Really getting clear on what your milestones are when you hit them and what your goals are as a team. And when you nail them, celebrate them. Even if they're not perfect, celebrate with the team. I think that goes down to the look and the feel of a culture that oftentimes is overlooked. We talk too much about what we're not doing or we're not seeing. We don't talk enough about the positives. So I think that just comes down to being half glass full, right? And the optimism that you have and the attitude that you portray. I think these are all important elements. Be open to new ideas, cognitive diversity, gender, ethnicity, race, age, nationality, whatever it is. We've seen too much of a deficit in diverse climates, diverse working environments. I think that speaks for itself. I don't probably need to dig too much into that, but you need to be more cognizant of diversity, equality, and inclusion these days. Be open to that. And also diversification in backgrounds. And with that come new ideas. With that come new perspectives. With that comes new opinions and so on. Get your story straight so all interviewees get the same storyline. For those of you here, I'd love to get hands raised. Again, I know we're virtual, but love to hear how many people interview for companies and line managers or decision makers are misaligned in terms of what they want. Get crystal clear on what it is you're working towards and get the messaging tight. Be proactive. You know you're going to have a shortfall in an area. We're going to have a project that's forthcoming. Don't wait 2-4 weeks out. The average time to fill a position is anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks. Be proactive. Start building a pipeline. Get the word out sooner rather than later and really drive that message home. Avoid the traditional HR paths. Be ready to leverage your network, your communities that you're involved in, whether it's a search firm like us or whether it's an alumni like UNCC's alumni. Tap into those resources. Don't just rely on somebody else to own it. Own it yourself. Partner with outside firms if you need to, service providers, advisory firms, et cetera, and hire folks to the best that aligns with your core business, not just your individual short-term needs. Guys, thank you so much. We're at time. Again, I'm Matt Donato with CyberSN. Here's my contact information if you need it. You can access all of this in the portal. I really appreciate y'all joining and look forward to talking to y'all in the future.